Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's lovely to see so many people and so many familiar names joining us. Just as a point of note, if you have a question throughout our remarks today, please do pop them down in the chat. Laura's going to be watching over that, and we'll try to reserve a little time at the end to answer a question or two. And for those that we aren't able to answer, we'll follow up with you later on. I definitely want to thank Laura Milton on our team for helping behind the scenes today. And of course, for those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Laly Lichtenfeld. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of African People and Wildlife, which is working to find the balance for communities and nature. And today, in honor of International Women's Day, we're very excited to present our new African Women in Conservation Initiative, which is really working to elevate African women's influence in the conservation sector through nature-based enterprise, through internships, girls' clubs, leadership support, and much more. And before I introduce our superstar and gender specialist, Prisca Urio, we have the really great pleasure today to receive very important remarks from our special guest and Goodwill Ambassador, Her Excellency Dr. Elsie Kanza, the Ambassador of the United Republic of Tanzania to the United States. So welcome and thank you very much, Ambassador.
Good afternoon, dear participants, and Laly Lichtenfeld. It's a pleasure to be with you once again since we last met last year. For everyone's benefit, my name is Ambassador Dr. Elsie Kanza. I arrived in the United States of America last year in September after being sworn in as ambassador in August of last year. I'm here for a 4-year term, and a big part of my agenda is advancing our President Samia Suluhu Hassan's agenda for deepening economic diplomacy. And in this regard, particularly in the US context, that means building on the last 60 years of strong diplomatic cooperation with the US administration and seeing how we can work closer on a commercial basis and working with the private sector to build that relationship going forward, which is more jobs for both our nations, more revenue for both our nations, but also more access, expanded access to goods and services that our citizens need. Now, having said that, conservation is a key part of our agenda as a nation. Over 1/3 of the country is under conservation of one form or the other. And the key linkage between that and our economic diplomacy agenda is that tourism is a major source of foreign direct investment and earnings for our country. That makes it critical to take that account into mind. But then linked to that is that we are preserving unique natural assets that are only found in Tanzania. And this means that we have a national responsibility to preserve natural wonders of the world, such as the Ngorongoro, Serengeti, and Kilimanjaro, not just for Tanzania, but for global populations and future generations. This brings with it an additional level of responsibility from the wildlife and nature point of view and biodiversity and how we continue to conserve nature's natural wonders. But then also take into account that there are local communities based in many of these areas of conservation, be it land, in national parks and game reserves, but we also have forests and we also have marine protected areas. I have Maasai heritage for one, so the Maasai lands area in northern Tanzania is of personal concern to me about how we balance between nature, wildlife, and people. And this was the basis for getting very excited when Laly mentioned this new initiative on the African women in conservation. One, it's aligned with what is a national priority, is a personal priority for me. Then two, it's also tapping into one of the challenges that we've continued to face on the conservation front, and that is the role that women and girls play. As you may be aware, women are responsible for a lot of the household duties, as well as caring, not just for their families, but surrounding environment. In Masailand, getting girls to school has always been very challenging. Fortunately, more and more of them are being able to get the education they need to be able to empower their lives. And so this opportunity through this highly commendable initiative by African People and Wildlife to think about strengthening the role of women conservation in different areas, be it through education, be it through entrepreneurship, and be it through leadership, but more important, just recognizing that women play a unique role, and then thinking through how we can equip them with the tools to be more effective in those particular spaces. For example, I have served and continue to serve on the Africa Advisory Council for the Nature Conservancy since 2013. And one of the things that I've come to appreciate through what is essentially a voluntary undertaking on my part is the importance of science. And from a community point of view, I'm particularly concerned about how to get this science into communities' hands, and how to explore innovative community-based conservation models. We have a number already underway. There's room for a whole lot more. And I'm excited by initiatives that continue to build on science and best practice locally and internationally that can help us to continue to conserve and preserve our natural wonders, if I may refer to them that way. Now, zooming out onto global stage and just building on conversations that I have been having here about how we can also join hands with the US administration and learn from conservation efforts that are underway in the US, is thinking about opportunities to partner with the Global 30 by 30 initiative, and what that means in terms of undertaking more conservation, better conservation, and also underpinning that is also how we pay for conservation, particularly sustainable wildlife management, and this includes flora and fauna, so biodiversity. And a key aspect of this is also what kinds of activities can be undertaken in conservation areas. In this regard, again, I commend the African Women in Conservation Initiative for supporting beekeeping activities. We, as the government, continue to think about how we balance whether it's photographic tourism and hunting activities, as we also look at other sporting activities, including hiking and fishing. And then linked to that is also exploring other financing tools, particularly when it comes to forestry areas where it is possible to use new tools that are emerging and mechanisms to help support this effort. It's a major undertaking in Tanzania, and I thank again organizations, dedicated organizations like the African People and Wildlife, and through them to the very generous donors who continue to allow us and support the government's efforts to sustain this conservation efforts currently, and really welcome the opportunity to work with all of you to keep in place a sustainable conservation management program. Thank you for your attention.
Wow, I'd certainly like to thank the ambassador for her very eloquent remarks. As we can all appreciate, Ambassador Kanza has really underscored the importance of this initiative. And this is why we've invited you, Prisca, to join our team and spearhead our efforts to strengthen the role of women and girls in conservation through APW's strong expertise in science, innovative technology, best practices in community-led conservation, and more. And with this, we can truly support those women, just as the ambassador suggests. So let me invite you now, Prisca, to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first got involved in gender-related work. Over to you, Prisca.
Hi, Laly. Nice to link up with you at this time. I am Prisca Urio, a Tanzanian, born and grew up in Dar es Salaam. And I am a gender specialist with African people and wildlife. And I've been working in the field of gender and development for 8 years now. I've been working mainly on economic empowerment of women in agriculture value chain. Now I'm happy that I'm working in the same goal of empowering women and finding the gender balance in the conservation sector. My passion in this field started early in my childhood. As I've mentioned, I grew up in a suburb of a commercial seat of Tanzania, which is Dar es Salaam. And my neighbors were the Yao, Zaramo, Ngindo, and Makonde tribes. I remember these tribes originated in coastal and southern part of Tanzania, and traditionally, they do not take their girls to school, especially secondary school or higher levels. So they end up in primary school or even drop out before completing primary education level. So this is because at the age of 9 up to 13, they kind of conduct their rituals and traditional processes that they go through, and they keep these girls indoor, getting some informal lessons on how to handle men when they enter into a relationship, how to become good wives. And after a couple of months, they prepare a traditional ceremony where these girls are considered adults, and they can do a celebration. They go around the streets with their priests out, and men choose the ones that they attract them and start a relationship. So this marked the end of the education journey to these girls. But I'm lucky that I got a chance to go to school because my mother insisted on it. And of course, she was working. So she told me if I don't want to be dependent, then I should be educated. I remember my mother insisted a lot on the importance of education to girls. So this made me feel bad about my friends who didn't get the same chance as me. They didn't get a chance because of the outdated norms, traditions, and cultural practices. So since then, I promised myself to challenge the culture, to challenge the norms and traditions that do not favor women and girls. So that's briefly about me.
Thanks, Prisca. And I've noted that Laura's dropped some information about the African Women in Conservation Initiative into the chat. If you're interested, do go there. But Prisca, in your experience in these past 8 years and now working with us, what do you really see as the biggest issues facing the Indigenous women that we are partnering with at this time?
There are several challenges and issues that these women face. They have inadequate knowledge about their rights. They lack decision-making power from the household level to the community level. They are also faced with gender triple roles, that they are busy with productive roles, with reproductive roles, and community roles as well. But also the girls in this community, they are impacted by traditional gender roles from the childhood, that they grow up feeling that they are voiceless, they are dependent, they are subjected to a lower class, they are subjected to a private sphere. But also mobility. Traditionally, women fall under private sphere, as I've said, so they don't have mobility, but also the issue of femininity and masculinity. And this starts at the family level, that for instance, a boy is not allowed to enter a kitchen, even in the community that we work, the Maasai tribe. A man is not supposed to enter in a kitchen. So even if a boy cries, they say, why are you crying like a girl? So we are just perceived as the powerless people, the people who really can't even handle some minor issues. So this has been reflected even in our school curriculums, that a woman is portrayed to do some jobs or some related roles. For example, I can just cite, I visited Kankala Primary School, I visited a youth educational club. It is called Twiga Club or Giraffe. So I asked those girls and boys, who do you want to be? So majority, half of the class told me, the girls told me that they want to be nurses. And the boys mentioned that they want to be pilots, engineers, doctors. So girls were more of nurses and teachers. I think, and I appreciate that we have now a female president, Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, at least. She has showed that women can do something, because one girl said she wants to be a president, and actually she has been motivated by knowing that now we have a female president. So now the school curriculum portrays women as nurses, as teachers, and men as those who can be maybe doctors or engineers. And this has impact even in the conservation sector, because we can see now different leadership roles in conservation sector, like the Tanzania National Parks Authority, Ngorongoro Conservation Area Authority. The positions are taken by men, and this is because of now the traditional and cultural practices that in our communities, and that I see them as challenges for these women that we work with.
Thanks, Prisca. You've touched on a lot of interesting points there, and I know that you're involved right now in supporting some research in Tanzania to understand what the barriers to women rising up the chain in the conservation sector are, and we're doing that in partnership with the government of Tanzania, and that's very exciting. And we've also seen results from our women's beekeeping initiative that women that have been in the program feel a greater sense of agency. They're more likely to send their children to school. So it's great to see some of the progress that we're having with this initiative. Of course, there's a lot more to go. And you've mentioned in your remarks that women do have a connection to the environment, as did Ambassador Kanza, and it's a very important connection to the environment. And this obviously offers a big opportunity up for conservation. Can you speak a little bit more about that and how we make that linkage between women and conservation?
Oh, yes. When you think of women, and when we talk of women, population-wise, women are many, and in our community, they are the users of the natural resources. For instance, they gather firewood to cook with, they use charcoal, they cultivate food crops to feed the family. So I can say they are the land managers, but for subsistence agriculture. So if more women are educated about conservation and the impact of their actions, we will see a big changes in our wildlife area. It is important also for women to take part in conservation, not only at the lower levels, but also at the higher levels, taking leadership positions, as I have mentioned, not only being part of those that are engaged in some lower positions, but we want to see them, or we call kind of seeing them taking position in government institutions like Tanzania Wildlife Authority, then Ngorongoro Conservation Authority, because for now, as I've mentioned, they're held by men, but we need to change this. We need to challenge this. And women face the disproportionate impact from both the biodiversity loss and gender-blind conservation measures. So we need them to be part of decision makers in conservation sector. I can also talk a little bit about the capability that women have in conducting environmental friendly conservation programs. For instance, our beekeeping program. We have seen that women keep bees, but also they get bees for pollination. They get royal gel, the bee wax, the bee venom, the honey, and other bee products where they add value. So they make soaps, candles, oil, and body hair, and of course, they sell them and get money and take their children to school and take care of the family. So women need to be equally and actively involved in conservation process.
So it looks like Prisca may have frozen up a little bit, but I think one of the things that she touched on that was really interesting also to explore, of course, and she was talking about the little boy not being allowed into the kitchen. is that what is the role of men and boys in gender equality? And as Prisca hopefully works to get back with us, I think one of her goals is to ensure that the African Women in Conservation Initiative is not just focused on women, but it's also focused on men and boys in the community, and that she ensures that we're partnering with this other sector of the population to make sure they're aware of the challenges that women face, that they embrace and understand those challenges, and that we work together to find culturally relevant solutions to some of the gender barriers that we face. So I know she's going to be working very hard at looking at equity and equality from an early age, bringing, even though we'll be starting some really exciting girls clubs in the communities. She'll also be working with the young boys in our wildlife clubs as well, to be able to, really ensure that we're covering the entire population. I see Prisca there again. Prisca, are you back with us?
Oh, yes, I'm back. Sorry, there was a thunderstorm, so
yeah, we're fortunate to have some rain heading our way, which is very exciting. So, Prisca, I just covered a little. Yeah, I covered a little bit about the role of men and boys, and I do know we're coming up towards the end of our webinar here, but I'd love for you just to, inspire us a little bit with your hopes for the future, for women in conservation, for the initiative that we're embarking on. Just let us know what some of your hopes going forward are, please.
Through the efforts of our government, the government of Tanzania, the governments around the world, our partners and other stakeholders, including every individual, I see women taking leadership positions in conservation. I see them being part of decision-making bodies, and I call upon everyone to support spreading the awareness, because an individual person cannot achieve this, but together we can. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Prisca. I know there's been some interest in whether there'll be a recording of this session. Absolutely, we will make a recording of this available so people can rewatch at any time. I do see some questions in the chat. There's one question, Prisca, about, have you done any studies about how the men whose wives are currently involved in your beekeeping activities have changed their views on women's roles? And I know this is what in the beginning of the initiative was a big, initially men were very resistant to the women partaking in the women's beekeeping initiative, and that has changed over time. So I know you've only recently joined us, but perhaps you have a little bit that you could let us know.
Oh, yes, through our monitoring and evaluation department, we tried talking to these women and men as well. So I can see there are changes. And because of the changes that happen at the household level, that women now take part in supporting the family, like they are economic independent. They also take part in decision making. So the men have changed to allow them to take part in decision making at the household level. I can just give an example of Mama Helena, a women beekeeper at Lobo Siret village, who is now really, she's involved in decision making at her household level, but also she has encouraged her child. She's now a ward counselor at Lobo Siret. So those are the changes that I've seen within a very short period of time that I joined African People and Wildlife.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm seeing another questions coming in here. Also greetings from folks all around Africa, which is exciting. There's a question about what kind of outreach are you doing to girls to engage them in these ideas and programs? And I know you were just recently in one of the schools, so yeah, perhaps you can tell us about that.
Yes, we have been visiting schools because we have youth environmental clubs, but also we are in the initial process of starting the girls clubs. So we go to schools, we engage them through discussion, and there is out school curriculum that we use to ensure that they catch up with our programs. They know about conservation. They take part and they prepare kind of, for instance, Lion Day. We call it Simba Day in Kiswahili, Environmental Day. They prepare some songs and they educate other children as well.
Okay, thank you. And then there's another question here, Prisca, about whether there's been any discussion around the importance of access to family planning for making it possible for more women to get involved with climate change adaptation. And I'm not sure, we may have one of our partners from Pathfinder International listening in today, but perhaps you can add a little bit of thoughts there. Sorry, Prisca, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but we will, I can see that time is running out and perhaps Prisca's connection is becoming unsteady again. I see a lot more questions rolling in, so please, we will follow up afterwards and answer your questions. As I close out this webinar and thank Prisca for joining us today, as well as Her Excellency, the Ambassador Elsie Kanza, and Laura for helping us behind the scenes here today. I do want to mention that in celebration of International Women's Day, we're very fortunate to have a generous donor who's pledged to match all contributions to our African Women in Conservation Initiative up to $50,000 throughout the entire month of March. So if you were inspired by what you heard from Prisca and the ambassador today, please do consider supporting this critical effort. Many thanks and sending a lot of roars, rumbles, and cheers from Tanzania. Asante sana and kwaheri for now. Thank you all for joining us today.